Hello, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram fam. Welcome to the second Wednesday night edition of The Other Side. And tonight's special guest is actually my neighbor. We had no idea we lived in the same town. Cool coincidence. But this is Marissa Marsh. She has been doing the IG takeover today. If y'all have been on Route 66's Instagram page, I am stuttering. I'm sorry. I don't know why. If y'all have been on the IG page today, she was the one doing the takeover. She is going to share her very personal journey with us through addiction, how she ended up in that dark place, and what finally brought her out of it, the battle, how she fought that battle, and how she is continuing to just slay it. And has just turned her life around and is doing amazing things and has beautiful children. The cutest curly-headed little girl. Oh my gosh.
She's the best. She's so awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. When she popped up on the Instagram stories and I was watching today, which I saw a picture of her on your Instagram. But when you showed her on the stories today, I was like, oh, I just want to hug her. Those curls. Oh, how cute.
She is. She's precious. She's different. I was used to having boys. And then along came a girl. I was like, oh wow, this is gonna be a lot different. She's very sassy. And I didn't expect that. I didn't. I was like, my daughter's not gonna be sassy. I see all these other sassy girls. I'm like, that's never gonna be my daughter. It's definitely my daughter. Definitely.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Marissa, I'll let you go ahead and I'll give the floor to you and let you tell us your story. Okay. Thank you for sharing with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate that very much. I do. I really I want people to know, whether it be if you're in addiction or you're struggling to stay out of addiction or you have a family member in addiction, that there's always hope. There's always hope. So I guess I'll start from when I was a kid and I'll work my way up to where I'm at now. So when I was a child, my parents separated when I was very young. They separated whenever I was 6. And my dad got remarried and my mom got remarried and all of that. When I was about 9, some neighbors that my family thought that we could trust, I was sexually abused by them. And it happened till I was about 12, I would say. And it wasn't like an all the time occurrence. It would happen on and off and on and off and on and off. So as the years went on, you kind of start living with that. Like it changes a child. It takes their innocence away. And I lived in a home where there wasn't really any emotional attachment. There was, I don't know how to say it. So it was more like monetary, like being provided for, but not an emotional, like nurturing type home. Right. And so I grew up in that. So being broken from being sexually abused to growing up in that, whenever I was about 15 years old, I started drinking. We were allowed to drink whenever I was a kid. So my stepbrother would have his friends over and just a lot of really bad things started taking place because they were drinking and then I was drinking. And it just led into worse things. And I found myself addicted to alcohol by the time I was in 10th, 11th grade. I drank constantly, and especially on the weekends with my friends and things like that. And I would have friends over, and we would drink. And as the years went on, I started smoking weed. I actually started smoking weed whenever I was 12 too. So that's the first time I was introduced to it. That's where the drugs started. It kind of progressed as I got older though. Once I was in high school, I was taking pills and, the second the teacher would leave the room to go to the bathroom or something like that, like we were doing drugs in the classroom, and that was just how it went. And after I graduated, it really went downhill. I have been to hair school and everything like that, but stuff just kept getting in the way. It was like if it wasn't bad relationships, it was drugs and alcohol. So whenever I was 19, me and one of my friends got into a bad car accident, and I was ejected out of the vehicle and had to be airlifted to Baptist. I broke my back. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it ripped this part of my wrist open, and I had to have a skin graft. My lung was collapsed. Just a really, really, really bad situation. And it happened because we had been drinking. I was actually in nursing school whenever all that happened, as crazy as that sounds. But we were hurrying, trying to get me home. I had to be at school, and her mom was on her way home. And we ended up running off the road and overcorrecting, and the vehicle flipped, and I was ejected out of it. I was in Baptist, I want to say, for 9 days. And whenever I got out, of course, having a broke back and all of this stuff, they put me on medication that was addictive. They put me on pain pills. And at that time, I had messed with drugs and alcohol, but I didn't understand the seriousness of pain pills and the addictiveness behind them. So when they went to take me off of them and I was addicted to them, I was like freak out mode, you know? So I started doing them on the side to keep from being sick and stuff. And then September I had started, that happened in June. And in September I tried to start nursing school back. Ended up getting into another really bad car accident where I was run over by a truck. And
Oh my gosh.
yeah, and it hemorrhaged my brain and lacerated my liver, and I found myself in Baptist again. This is just 3 months apart.
Oh,
And
Lord.
yeah, it was crazy. It fractured. I want to say it fractured the top of my foot. It was just bad all the way around. But they actually didn't find the brain hemorrhage for 2 days. They held me in a hospital local to us for 48 hours just to monitor the laceration on my liver. And when the doctor came for me to sign my release papers, I was sick, and he asked me how long I had been sick. And I told him the whole time that I had been there. And he was like, well, he said, I'm going to do a CT scan before you leave, and we're going to see what's going on. And come to find out I had a brain bleed. And so they rushed me to Baptist. And the craziest thing is, like, whenever I was in the helicopter, from the first wreck, it wasn't scary. But whenever they put me in the back of that ambulance, I guess because I was like coherent and it wasn't like a state of shock at that point, like the trauma, I had a couple of days for everything to kind of die down. All the stuff that was above me in the ambulance, like rocking on the interstate because of how fast the ambulance was going, it was so freaky. And like, that is one of the things that I remember the most is just the shaking of all the stuff in the ambulance. I was convinced it was going to fall on top of me. And I'm laughing about it because I was in pure panic mode.
Yeah.
And I think I spent 6 days in the hospital that time. And of course, whenever I got out, I was on pain pills again, and it got bad. That's whenever everything started getting out of hand because I started failing my drug tests for marijuana. So they took my pain pills from me. And that was whenever I turned to using street drugs. And that's where I met my oldest son's dad. And we just formed a really bad relationship. It was just bad all the way around. And there was never like really a connection between us. It was more or less just like drug related.
Yeah.
And I found myself pregnant with my oldest son, and he was born in 2011. And right after he was born, he was about 5 weeks old. I tried IV drugs for the first time, which is intravenous drugs. And that's how I started doing my pain pills. And I found myself just broken. The same night that I done it, I had like just major meltdown, and DSS showed up, and that's the first time that I lost him. So he went to stay with my dad for that night. My mom was I think she was in Tennessee or something, in Gatlinburg, and she came home and she got him, and I went and got sober, was doing Suboxone or Subutex or something, some kind of maintenance medication to keep from staying on it. to keep from staying on pain pills, try to get clean and get him back. And I did. It took me 90 days, but I got him back. And I had him till he was right at a year old. It was right before he turned a year old, I believe. And I had another relapse spell, and me and his dad just had this huge falling out, and I quit taking the maintenance medication that I was on. And that is where it went from 0 to 100 really quick. And I found myself in and out of jail. This went on for years. And then in 2014, I went to rehab. I believe it was 2014. I went to rehab at a place called Hannah's Haven. And before I went there, I went to Solus Christus, which is a safe house for women that is in East Bend, North Carolina. And I had been to church my whole life. Like I had a foundational belief of what would help me make it out of addiction, but I didn't really apply those things unless it was like to basically look good to people.
Right.
And when I went to Solus, there was a woman there by the name, we called her Sammy. Her name is Sandra, actually. And I was determined to leave one night. I didn't want to be there. I was mentally in withdrawals, even though my body wasn't withdrawing. I was mentally in withdrawals. So I got ready, and it was like 11 o'clock at night, and I was going to leave. And I get to the bottom of the steps, and she just gave me this stern, "You're better than this" talk. And it changed my whole perspective. I know that was one of the first times that I ever really felt like I wanted to be different. I actually felt like I was worth changing. Like I wasn't just a drug addict, that I had a different identity than a drug addict and a low life and all these things that had, I had taken on myself. Right. And so I left from there and went to a rehab, and I was there for 8 months.
Wow.
Actually,
8 months?
I was gone a total of 10 months. Yes.
Continue. We'll talk about that.
Yeah. So, the whole time that I was gone, I only saw my son twice in all of that. And I was very defeated. I felt like I wasn't worthy enough to be his mom. I did not feel like I mattered as his mom. I had absolutely no hope. Like I felt like I wanted to be different, but I didn't feel like there was any hope that I would ever be different because I didn't have that support from my mom. And even though I was told that she would and all these things, the support wasn't there. After years of using drugs and making promises that you're going to change, it's hard for people to continue to believe in you. I think my biggest thing is like, if someone's trying to get help, stand by them. No matter how many times they say they're going to, if they do it, stand by them, no matter what that looks like. And so I actually ended up getting kicked out because of my attitude. I had a really bad attitude. I had just this, I carried myself in a way that said, "You're not going to tell me what to do, and I'm going to do whatever I want to." And it was destroying my life. And I couldn't submit to any authority that was over me. I couldn't take advice from anyone. But while I was there, 2 weeks after I went, this woman came. Her name is Becca. And she quickly became one of the only people that I trusted. I had been very hurt from being sexually abused and just having, this horrible relationship with my mom. And I didn't trust anybody. I didn't want to trust anybody. And the second I laid eyes on her, it was like I knew that I could trust her. And I started wanting this relationship with her. And she quickly became one of my biggest fans and one of my biggest supporters. And she quickly became like a mom to me. And I started considering her, I call her my mom too, still to this day. She is one of my biggest fans. And I wholeheartedly believe, had God not put her in my life when he did, I probably wouldn't have changed, because nobody had ever believed in me like that. Nobody had ever said the things to me and poured into me the way that she did. When I left the rehab, I went back to Solus Christus. They have they don't anymore. They had a transitional house for women. And it was me and another girl there. And one of my friends that I had actually gone to Solus with prior was calling me, asking me for help. And contrary to everything that my other women and women that I admired at that time were telling me, that I wasn't ready to help anyone at that point. I didn't listen. I thought that I could help her. I thought that I could change her. I thought that if I poured into her the way that I was being poured into, that I could help her. And the reality is I just wasn't ready. So instead of helping her, I was influenced negatively and actually ended up relapsing. I was in ministry school. I had started at Bridges Christian College in Winston-Salem and was doing women in leadership. And I remember when I relapsed, I went to the church, to the school, and I went over, and a lot of the people, they were together praying and stuff like that. And I remember going over there, and the woman could just see the look on my face whenever I walked in, and she immediately just walked over to me and wrapped her arms around me, and she started praying for me. And that was really hard because I knew better at that point. I knew that I could heal, but I just hadn't. I hadn't decided that enough was enough. I hadn't decided that I had to let my heart break and my disappointments and stuff go.
Now, how long of a relapse period was that?
It happened. I relapsed on Mother's Day of that year, and I went, and I'm getting to the part, but it lasted until August 21st. So, or August 20th. So after that happened, it continued. And it was just, it turned in to one of the worst parts of my addiction that I had ever faced, because I went from using pain pills to using heroin, and I overdosed like 6 times in the matter of like 3 months. So
I thought you were already at the worst. Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, it got worse. I was actually on probation, and they put me on house arrest because I failed a drug test, because I was on probation from all of my stuff prior. I had gotten DUIs. I had gotten breaking and entering charges. I had been charged with like 52 charges, and they had consolidated them into like 13 charges. And so I was on I wasn't on house arrest, but they put me on house arrest for failing drug tests and going out and doing stuff that I wasn't supposed to be doing. And he told me, he was like, if you do anything to violate your house arrest, I'm going to send you to prison. And I kept using and doing whatever I wanted to do. I kept breaking my curfew, even on house arrest. And he finally told me, he was like, you need to come turn yourself in. And I said, okay. So me and the girl that I had tried to help were actually that's who I was with the whole time, because that's where she lived, was where I was living at the time. And he violated my probation, and I was facing a year in prison. And he came to me, and he pulled, I was sitting in jail in Winston-Salem, and he pulled me up, and he said, I'm going to let you go to Black Mountain for 90 days, which is a rehab facility up in Black Mountain, North Carolina. And I denied it. I said, I'm not. I'm going to go to prison. I've been to rehab, and it didn't change me. And something's got to give, because I'm tired of living like this. And if prison doesn't change me, then there's not going to be any hope. There's just no hope. And he was shocked. He really couldn't believe it. And he kept, he would send a letter and try to get me to sign these papers. I was going to go to Black Mountain, and I would never return them to him. And where we went before the judge on my court date, and I told the judge to activate my sentence. And they did. And so I went to prison thinking that I was going to do a year in prison. And that's not what happened. I got down there, and I had got my DUI in May, and I had been convicted in May, and the law changed in October of that year. Prior to the law changing, if it was a DUI, your time got cut in half, and I was not aware of that. So when I got down there, I was actually only going to do 6 months instead of a year. That entire time, I secluded myself from people, and I read my Bible, and I asked God for grace, because I had some other pending charges that I was facing another 2 to 4 years for that I did not do. And I was terrified, absolutely terrified. During the time that I was in prison, the girl that I had relapsed with, she passed away. She overdosed and died. It was horrific. It was very scary because she had become one of my very good friends. And the whole time I was in there, my mom too, I think I got a letter almost every day, if not every other day. And then sometimes I wouldn't get one for like 3 or 4 days, but then I would get a bunch of them at the same time. It just depends. It just depended on how they gave us our mail. And she was always sending me stuff telling me that I was not an addict. And I think that was one of the biggest turning points for me, was accepting that I wasn't an addict. There's so many things that say once an addict, always an addict. And that's not something that's in my beliefs. If it gets people sober, then do whatever it takes to get sober for you, whatever works for you. But it didn't work for me. Speaking that and believing that about myself was almost like it was an excuse for me to relapse. It was like an excuse, like, well, I have a disease, so if I go use, then it's a disease, so I can, And that was the attitude that I had about it. It was. But once I started to believe that I'm not an addict, it took away my excuse. It took away my identity. It didn't take away my identity. It took away that negative identity that I was putting on myself. And I started to believe that I was more than a conqueror. I was the righteousness of God. You become all of these things outside of what the world starts saying about you. And the world said a lot of bad stuff about me. And then I went to live. Once I got out of prison, I went and lived with my mom too, and decided after about a month that I was going to come home. It was very scary because coming back to the place where all your brokenness has been is very, very scary. I did not want to come back here. It was the last thing that I wanted to do. I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to be near anybody. The only reason that I came back was because of my son. Taylorsville, yeah. Had Jonah not been here, I wouldn't have come back here. I would have found every reason to try to stay gone. But I came back and I lived with my Nana, and I stayed in touch with my mom too and stuff like that. And I got involved with a church that's local, volunteering and stuff like that. And I have been drug-free since I got out of prison, since the day I went to prison or turned myself in at the jail that day in Winston-Salem. Whenever I came home, I did kind of drink on the weekends here and there with some friends that I probably shouldn't. I definitely shouldn't have been drinking. That's just reality, because that was where it all started for me. I found out that I was pregnant with my middle son, and I feel like there's something on my forehead. I'm sorry, it's distracted me. But I found out I was pregnant with my middle son, and it quickly woke me up. And I was like, okay, this is not the way that I need to be going. Drinking is the last thing that I need to be doing, but addiction is hard. If you don't take the time to heal from the stuff that broke you, if you don't sit down and face the pain, it's hard. It is so hard to sit down and say, okay, these people abused me, but I forgive them. These people hurt me. I was a child, but I choose to forgive them. And being honest with yourself about the things that happened to you. And realizing that your pain and your suffering can help someone else. I think that was another big turning point for me. It made everything else I don't want to say worth it, but it made it bearable. To know that there are a lot of people and a lot of kids that this kind of stuff happens to all the time. It's happening all the time in the walls of homes. It's happening with people that you would least expect. And it's denied by a lot of people. And children don't have the capacity to make up things like that.
No.
They can't describe those kinds of things unless it has happened. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the biggest things parents need to do is, like, no matter what, you need to believe your kids, no matter who they say it about. You need to believe your children. And since I've been home, I've been fighting for a relationship with my oldest son. I came home when he was 4, and he's now almost 9, and we're still in court. I waited a couple years to file anything because I was hoping that because I had changed, that relationship would be fought for.
You would think that your mom would see your change and just be gracious where your son is concerned. I don't I can and can't understand that. I can.
Right. I understand to an extent.
Right.
There's a line that I draw in it. And I think after 5 years, it would not be the way that it is today had that bond been nurtured whenever I was showing change. And, I wasn't perfect. I wasn't. Addicts aren't only learning not to use drugs, and we're having to heal from the stuff that broke us. We're having to learn how to manage money. We're literally having to relearn life in general, and find a different purpose. Yeah. And it's not so cut and dry. I think a lot of people think, oh, it's bad, just don't do it. That's just not it. That is not the way that addiction is. It's way more complex than that. And I tell everybody, like, if you don't have any experience with it whatsoever, you really don't get a say so. Most people that say, oh, just quit, usually they've been scarred by somebody that hasn't changed and is still using. And they need to forgive them. That's really what it boils down to.
Well, I think if someone says to you, oh, just quit, no, they have no understanding of it whatsoever.
No.
And I mean, my understanding of it does not come from being a user. I've never been a drug addict. I will have a drink socially, but I don't even like to drink that much to have very many social drinks. I can count on one hand how many I've had in the last 5 years, probably.
Right.
Except for when I'm on a cruise. Now, that is bad. When I'm on a cruise, I will have a couple a day.
Right.
But we all
and some people are just fine. Like, some people can have a drink or 5 and they're fine, and the next day they're not craving it. But
Right. But and there's a huge difference in someone that can have a social drink and handle it versus someone that just can't, because it will lead to 2 or 10, or it will lead to
other things,
marijuana or worse drugs. And so, my understanding doesn't come from a user standpoint. It comes from being abused by someone. And so, I mean, what you said hit heavily with me, that you're not only learning how to get rid of those drugs or alcohol or whatever your addiction choice is. And choice is a bad word, sorry, but you know what I meant. Whatever, you're using. You're not only having to recover from that and battle that. If you don't battle the demons that caused you to turn to drugs or alcohol to begin with, then there's no way
that you're going to overcome it. You can't.
Yeah, you can't.
You'll always turn back to it until you heal. And that is like one of the biggest things I keep telling people. Like, you have to heal. You have to face it. You're strong enough to face it. You're strong enough to battle it, and you will conquer it, and you will win. You'll win the healing. But you have to fight for yourself. And that comes from learning to love yourself, and learning to love yourself comes in when you realize that you're not a drug addict. You're not a piece of crap. You're not a product of all these poor choices that you're making with your life. That's not who you are. The only thing that you are identified by is by Jesus. And that's just because that's where I'm coming from. That is my standpoint. So
Yeah.
I am only identified by the fact that I'm a conqueror. And that right there is enough to tell me that I will conquer addiction. I did conquer addiction, and anybody else can too. You just have to believe. It all starts with believing. You have to literally say, that's not who I am. That's not how I'm going to act. And anytime those thoughts come in, you have to say, but that's not who I am. And you literally have to start like pushing it away. One of the greatest things you'll ever do is find your people. Find your people. Find the people that encourage you. Find the people that root for you. Find the people that, regardless of if you make 10 dumb decisions, you know you can call them and tell them that you were stupid. And they're going to say, you know what, babe, it's fine. Let's pick up. Let's do this. Remember who you are. God loves you. And that's the kind of stuff that they're telling you. You don't want to. I know one of the right now where I'm at, like what I'm facing, we're in a custody battle over my oldest son. It's been in court for about 2 years. I get him every other weekend now. I am in the pursuit of full custody. And gosh, it's crazy how much custody battles cost. We're talking like 10,000 plus. Like it's so crazy. It's so crazy. And you know, being married to my husband, he understands addiction. He walked through it. And it's something that is just, it's really, really, really difficult. It takes its toll on families. It takes its toll on relationships. It does. But you matter. And that's why I wore this shirt. It says, you matter. Your story matters. You are not alone. I think one of the worst things I ever did was hide what was happening to me. Hide what had happened. I was told to be silent. And you know, there was something I even told my mom that still to this day, she doesn't believe me about. And like, guys, that was one of the things that you have to believe your kids. I don't care who it's about. I don't care if they don't tell you the whole story, if they exaggerate just a little bit and later come back to you and say, you know what, I exaggerated on this part, but this part's true, which is what I done. I exaggerated my story. But I wasn't believed from the get-go. So that took a toll on me and my relationship and trusting, being able to trust my own mom. Like she didn't believe me. And when a parent doesn't believe their child, it's like a slap in the face. Now, I was 15 or 16 or something like that whenever I told her about that. But
is that why you exaggerated it, because she didn't believe you? So
that was why I exaggerated it.
Yeah. Well,
because I wanted her to believe me.
Right.
And I felt like if I just add this little bit, she's definitely going to believe me. You know, because I already knew in my mind that because of who it was about, that she would not believe me. Like I knew that in my head. And it's really hard. Like it's so hard because that was who raised me. That was, in my eyes, my best friend. Like she was going to be I must say I still use certain expressions. So she was my ride or die. Like in my eyes, she was the woman that was always going to have my back. She was the woman that was always going to be there when push come to shove. And today, as much as I hate to say it, she's my biggest enemy. And it sucks because that's my mom.
Yeah.
And it sucks so bad. Like my husband, I have cried myself to sleep at night over the relationship. It takes its toll on my relationship with my mother-in-law. It takes its toll on my relationship with anybody. If me and her have a little tiff or something like that, it's like it just kind of radiates. So we keep ourselves separated. Yeah. And it sucks because addiction made it that much worse, you know, and it's just be there for your kids. But coming from an addict standpoint, like we have to be courageous And if nobody else in this world believes in us, believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Believe in yourself and like dig into what God's word says about you. And God's word does not call you an addict. That's not reality. Once you accept Jesus, you take on a completely different identity. You're not a product of the choices that you make. That's not who you are. No, because, and I love to use this analogy.
The sins are wiped away.
When Gideon was called to battle, God found him hiding in a wine press because he was such a coward.
When you did that, I love.
He was such a coward, but whenever God found him hiding in a wine press, God didn't say, "Gideon, you coward, come out of there and go fight that battle." No, He said, "Gideon, mighty man of valor, my mighty man of valor." Like he called him something completely different than the choices that he was making, and that's huge to come to the realization that you're not who you think you are if you're believing these negative things about you. Like that is not your identity. And as long as you believe that that's your identity, you're going to live up to that. So you have to start believing something different about yourself so you can start living up to better standards of yourself in your life. You have to. And if you want change, you can change. You've got to find what works for you. And the best thing you'll ever do is forgive yourself. The day that I forgave myself for walking away from my oldest child, for choosing addiction over his precious little self, he is my twin. He is he's a boy version of me. And I didn't realize that I needed to forgive myself. I was just angry. And it was an Easter Sunday right after I got out of prison, and I went into church, and I had been listening to Great Are You, Lord on repeat by All Sons and Daughters in my headphones all week long. And we walk into church, and I just hear the first two keys. So whenever you listen to that song, there's two keys in the very beginning of it that play on the keyboard. And the second I heard those two keys, like no joke, it was like a full motion sweep. I set my Bible and stuff down on the chair. The next thing you know, I'm at the front of the church and I'm on my face sobbing. I cried for probably an hour straight, just sobbing. And I remember this guy looking at me and he said, "You are just pouring out years of unforgiveness for yourself for what you've done to your son." This man didn't know me from Adam. Okay. He didn't have a clue who I was. I had never, ever talked to this man. I was like, "What in the world?" He said, "But as you're crying and you're giving this to God, you're going to have major strength given back to you." And I've never been the same. Just being able to say, like, I forgive myself because those decisions were not who I was. Those decisions that I was making was a product of a broken 9-year-old girl that was abused and had her innocence stolen from her, and did not know how to function in life with all the pain and burdens she was carrying.
Yeah.
That was what was happening to me. 87% of children that are sexually abused turn to drugs to deal with it. 87%. There's a 13% chance that a child that is sexually abused will not turn to drugs. It's sad. And the rate of children that are being sexually abused is skyrocketing. It is skyrocketing. It's ridiculous. And so I just guys, we're worth more. We're worth so much more than the heartache and the trauma. Like, you're not a product of any of that. That is what happened to you. That is not who you are. And it does not have to dictate your future. It does not have to continue to define the path that you are living on. And it does not have to continue to define your relationships. If you have to disconnect with somebody because they are unhealthy and toxic in your life, cut them off. Cut them off. It don't matter who it is, how close you are to them, or how close you thought they were to you. If they are causing trauma in your life, or not believing in you and not supporting you when you're trying to change, or not supporting your hopes and your dreams, cut them off.
Absolutely.
Nip it in the bud. Don't give the enemy a foothold. Get him out of your life, no matter how he's getting through, because chances are that person is hurt by the decisions that you made. Or they're hurt from something that happened in their childhood that they haven't healed from, so they don't know how to help you. Hurt people hurt people.
Oh, yeah.
So even though it might not be what you want to do, cut those relationships off. And sorry, I couldn't fly, but I was like, whoa. But like, you can do this. You don't have to live in trauma. You don't have to live in addiction. You don't have to live this way. There is a better way. And I'm telling you right now, if you know anybody or you need somebody to talk to, I'm here. I'm here for it. Like I am rooting you on every day, all day. Like you don't have to live like that. You don't. There is a different way, and you can heal. And I am telling you, the excuses have to go. They have to go. They have to go. If you were hurt whenever you were a kid, choose healing. If you were if you had traumatic situations that happened and you replay those things in your head, or maybe you just suppressed them and you don't think about them anymore, but you're still acting out, chances are you have a root in there that needs to come out. I compare it to a tree. If you plant a tree and a tree has bad roots, you're not going to get good fruit out of a tree that has bad roots. You're going to get rotten fruit every time. It's going to rot. It's going to be nasty. It's going to taste nasty. So what do you have to do with that tree? You got to rip it out. You got to get those roots out of the ground. It's the same thing when you start healing and you want to become a better person. You have to pull those roots out one at a time. Even if it's just one at a time. I have seen some people take years and rip it out all at one time, and they're good. They're fine. I was not that person. Mine has been like progressive over time. I'm still dealing with it. Like, especially lately, like I've been having a lot of stuff go on that has just been like, okay, this is more healing needs to take place. And I'm 5 years down the road, and it's still happening. So, but you get to the point where you can live with it enough that you start walking through it. So
now Marissa, how do you face challenges now? Because I know you're going through a difficult time right now with the custody battle and everything else, just life in general. And COVID this year has just turned everything upside down. So like, previously you would have turned to drugs. Mm-hmm. So that's not your crutch any longer. So how do you handle problems when they come to you now?
I put headphones in. I read books that are uplifting. And I honestly, like sometimes I have to just pull away to the point that I put headphones in and I turn the music up and I listen to worship music, and I'll have the same song on repeat. If it's speaking to me, I will have a song on repeat and just play it and play it and play it. And then of course I pray and I ask. Now I'm going to tell you, there are moments where it gets so intense that I'm still a human. I'm not perfect. And I lash out and there's no Jesus in me at all sometimes because of the way that I behave. And those behaviors are not okay. And those are things that I still need to work on in myself.
But you know what? I love that you're human. And also, well, everybody's human, but I love that you can admit that. Mm-hmm. I think there's a big problem I'm just going to say, especially in our area.
Oh, yeah.
There is a big problem with some Christians.
Mm-hmm. It's pride.
That, they're perfect. Mm-hmm. And if we're not, then, oh God, the worst thing, you're terrible.
Yeah.
You're terrible because you're not allowed to make a mistake. Mm-mm. If you're a Christian, you're not supposed to make a mistake.
That is Taylorsville all day, every day. Yeah. And
girl,
it's sad. It's so sad.
It's not just Taylorsville. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. It's
everywhere. Yeah. But for people out there that are struggling with anything,
that's not going to help them.
No, it's not.
That's not how you get through to people.
It's not. It absolutely is not how you get through to people.
Loving does not mean that you enable somebody. Yes. You do not have to enable somebody to love them. You can unconditionally love someone without enabling their behavior. I've had to do it myself. Like, I have someone in my life that was struggling with addiction very bad, and I could not enable that, but I had to choose to love them unconditionally. And whenever they were out doing their stupid stuff, I was keyboard warrior. All day, you are loved. You are not a product of what you're doing. God loves you. Don't forget how much he loves you. And then I would start sending like scriptures and like saying, you are such and such in Christ. And God says this about you. And God says that. And like, I would start pointing them to the encouraging things in scripture. Now, don't get me wrong. I have my moments with that person.
Oh, yeah.
I had had enough and I would blow up. But
Because when does it come to tough love?
man, tough love's hard. Tough love is
Tough love is hard, but I think that goes back to when you were talking about separating yourself from toxic people.
it is.
Because yes, and I want to interject here, and please,
You're
I
fine, go ahead.
welcome a healthy debate. Welcome it if you have a different opinion than me.
Yeah.
And remember, we're from opposite sides of the fence.
Right.
So, because I had to separate myself from that person because that person, well, that person's entire family, I had to separate myself from them because they, in a whole, were just toxic people. And I could not have them in my life.
Right.
Did I think this person was going to change and become sober and stay out of jail and be a good person? No.
Right.
Why? From 20 years experience.
Right. Right.
From 20 years of hearing, I'm better. I'm better. No, you're not. It was a lie.
Right.
You're just telling me what I want to hear.
Right.
And, and then, but you get to a point to where, or I did anyway, I got to a point to where, okay, I can't have anything to do with this family at all. Or I'll just say it. I couldn't have anything to do with his mother any longer because she continued to enable him and believe for the 50th, the 100th time, oh, he's better this time. Well,
yeah.
No, he's not. And I'm not subjecting my son to it anymore.
Right.
So, it's just toxic behavior. At some point, when you see that somebody has to want to get better.
Yes, and they do. They do. So I think
somebody has to want to get better. And I think when someone doesn't choose that want to, when they don't want to change that identity that they caused upon themselves, then if people separate themselves from it, they have no one to blame but themselves at that point.
I agree.
But if you reach that rock bottom and you reach up and you do something about it, then I'm going to give you 100% of my support.
Right. Right. And that's the way that it's supposed to be. You have to do tough love. But when someone, and that, that I'll say this, rock bottom is when you choose to stop digging. You can dig yourself all the way to the grave.
Oh, yeah.
If you want your grave to be rock bottom, that can be your rock bottom. But rock bottom can be at any point that you choose to stop digging. You can go deeper every single time, all the way to the grave. That can be your rock bottom if you want it to. That was almost my rock bottom a couple times. And I thank God that he did not let that be the case for me. But just like your tough love, when you left that person or you cut them out of your life, had they chose to change at that point and truly it was obvious and apparent that they had changed, then your tough love you would have been able to say, okay, they responded to that tough love. They responded because they cared. They cared enough to respond to it. I've had to do that before. I've had to say, you're out. It's done. Get out of my life. Thankfully, my situation did not turn out like yours. Mine was more like, I love you so much. I'm willing to do whatever I need to do to change, to save us, to make everything work. My tough love looked like the person repenting and turning and saying, I'll do whatever I can to make this work. And, 2.5, 3 years later, it's completely different.
Yeah.
And now, coming from two people that have led the lives that we've led, I'm not going to lie, because we're both leaders. We both like to lead. So I struggle staying in that submissive mind frame of, okay, he's the man, because I'm gung-ho, let's go, let's do this. And I'm ready to run the race, and then I feel like sometimes he's going, whoa, babe, not yet. And I'm like, ugh, but, I'll say my husband, he had his own struggles, but when the tough love, when push came to shove, he said, I love you more than anything. And I'm going to do this for us. And he did. And today, he went from not working, not wanting to work, not going to work, to being at the top of his company. He works at the Toyota dealership. And he is like first or second almost every single month. He's only been there like 8 months, and he runs neck and neck with guys that have been there 5 years. When he chose a different life, boom, he was like, he has turned into the best provider, the best husband. We both, like I said, we both have that leader personality. We can butt heads sometimes, and he wants things a certain way, and I don't want to do that sometimes. And but it's really, I look back on some of the stats that we have, and I'm like, that's so stupid.
Oh yeah.
Like, compared to everything else that we've been through, I know how much he loves me, and because he chose me and the kids, he chose our livelihood over all the other stuff.
Yeah. And that's when you know that you have beaten those demons, whatever they are.
Yeah.
And you've fought that battle, and you can say, okay, I've won this battle. The whole war might not be over, because I think someone that has had, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think someone that has had an addiction problem to whatever it is.
You got some personality issues. I'm just going to say it like that. We got some stuff, some attitudes and stuff we have to work on once we get that out of the way.
That's not where I was going, but yeah, probably. But what I was going to say is, like, there's always going to be a war for you.
Yeah.
That you're going to, every day is a battle that you've won, because, all right, I'm going to take it one day at a time.
Yeah.
And all right, I made it through today. So that battle's won.
Yeah.
But do you look at it that way? Is like every day a battle for you? Like, I'm going to take things one day at a time, and today's good? Or are you to a point now where you're like, I got this?
I'm to a point now where I got it. Now, I'm not going to lie. Like, sometimes it's like 6 months. Sometimes it's like a year. Sometimes it's like 9 months. I'll have like a dream or something that'll kind of kick in these emotions, and I'm going, okay, what is going on? Why did I have that dream? And it'll be a dream about drinking, or it'll be a dream about drugs, or it'll be a dream about some kind of trauma situation happening, and it triggers all these crazy emotions inside of me. And I believe that it's an attack. It's Satan trying to get me to relapse. He's trying to get me to do something stupid to blow everything I've worked so hard to accomplish. And it's not going to happen. Like,
or do you think
it's not going to happen?
Or do you think maybe it's because you've become, what's the word? I don't want to use the word complacent, because that implies lazy, and I don't mean that, but too confident in your sobriety that maybe it's not Satan, but maybe it's God being like,
humble yourself
here's
a little bit.
A little reminder of where you were. I want you to remember this.
It could be.
I don't know.
I've never thought about it like that, but it definitely could be. I mean, it could be.
But I mean, I do know that this is a perfect example. I just started on Monday nights having Monday night gospel hour.
Yeah.
And so this past Monday, I was feeling bad. I just felt bad all day long. And I came this close to calling my guest and saying, I'm going to cancel the show tonight.
Yeah.
Well, I told my son, I was like, that devil, that's all it is the devil. Because he knows I'm trying to do something good in starting a gospel show on here.
Yeah.
And he's trying to ruin that.
I agree.
And no, it's not going to happen. And then my son, you just have to know my son, he's like, that devil, who would have thought he'd be so rude?
Isn't he right, though?
Yeah. I'm like, I know, right? How dare him?
How dare him?
I was like,
of course he would never do that. How could he even think of something like that?
Yeah. I'm like, gosh, Zachary, why would you think that the devil would even be like that? What gave it away? His red beady eyes or something? I don't know. We just went back and forth for a few minutes, and it was just so funny. But that is so true, because when you are trying to be good and do good, that's when you hear from him.
You start getting resistance.
Exactly.
It's like, I'll be honest with you. My mom too. I was texting her earlier today and yesterday and the day before. Ever since I found out about coming on here, everything tried to stop me.
It's hit you from every
emotions were all out of whack. Not yesterday, But the day before, they were everywhere. And he was like, I'm not going to be able to do this. Like, look at me. Look at the way that I'm behaving. Look how emotional I am. How can I get on here and tell people that they need to be okay whenever I'm like I am? And like everything was telling me to stop, and not do it. And I was like, no, because I'm imperfect and I am a human. And that's the beauty of it. Like, I don't have to be perfect to get on here and say, hey, you can get sober. Like you can do it. But it was totally the enemy attacking me. And my mom too, she was like, it is the enemy. He does not want you to do it. He doesn't want people to know that you can get sober and be happy and be joyful. And
because misery loves company.
I struggle with PTSD. I made a post on my Facebook the other day. It was during whenever I was feeling like that. And you can go back and read it. Like, I'm raw on my Facebook. I don't get on my Facebook and act like my life is perfect. I try to be raw, real, and relatable with people. And,
I am too. Well, that's why I reached out to you.
Yeah, I don't want this to act like my life is perfect. It's not. Yeah. It's messy. I have 2 toddlers. I'm in a custody battle for my oldest child. My toddlers are 19 months apart. My house sometimes looks like it's been ripped apart by a tornado. I mean, it's not, but I made that post and I was like, I know that you feel this way and this way and this way, but don't you ever forget where you come from. And it was like, I was talking to me, but I knew I needed to share it. And there was women commenting and there was women that were messaging me and they were like, thank you so much for sharing that, because I had been to my wits end today. I was ready to snap. I was like, I already snapped, but that's why I made that post.
Yes, exactly. And that's part 2 of what I meant a while ago when I made the comment I did about, and people, please don't miss it. I am a God-fearing, God-loving woman. I am a Christian, but I do not like Christians that think they're perfect, because I'm sorry, they don't exist.
The world's broken. It doesn't need perfect people. It needs broken people that have figured out how to make it through the brokenness.
Exactly.
The world doesn't need your perfection. It needs Jesus. It needs hope. It needs to hear your brokenness and your healing and your restoration and how you made it out. They don't need to hear how you're better than everybody else. That's not what the world needs. We got Rona running around doing her crazy stuff, making everybody depressed, having to get locked down. I mean, it's crazy right now. People are losing loved ones. There's depressions at an all-time high. Addiction overdoses are at an all-time high. Suicides at an all-time high right now. Stop acting like you're perfect and let people know what you're doing to breathe and what you're doing to survive.
Exactly.
Like, if you're perfect, Linda, don't come find me on Facebook because you won't like me.
Exactly. And that's, you just like copied what my guest last week said. And if you didn't see that show, if you're not familiar with this guy, go back and watch it. Do you know who Kevin Hines is?
I don't.
Okay.
Wait a minute.
Kevin Hines is the one that jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge trying to commit suicide.
Oh my gosh. He was on your show last week?
Yeah, last Wednesday. Go back and watch it.
Okay, I will.
Fabulous show. Fabulous. Yeah. But yeah, when he was 17, he was diagnosed with bipolar. And I'm really, really summarizing this. But when he was 17, he was diagnosed with bipolar. A whole lot of stuff through his childhood led up to problems here. But then when he was 19 is when he decided he was going to commit suicide. And he knew he was going to jump off the bridge.
Yeah.
6 o'clock that morning, his dad asked him, "Are you okay?" And because his dad knew something just wasn't right. And he was like, "Kevin, are you okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm fine." He said at 6 o'clock that morning, I could say, "I'm fine." He said, then he got on the bus to ride out to the bridge. And he said he bargained with himself. He said, if just one person will ask me if I'm okay or ask me what's wrong, I'll spill everything and I won't jump. But if nobody says anything to me, I'm done.
Yeah.
Neither one of those things happened. Instead, 2 guys on the bus looked over at him and said, "What's wrong with that guy?" and starts laughing. Because Kevin's sitting over there crying his eyes out, wishing One person cared enough to ask him what was wrong, and these guys laugh at him.
Yeah. It's a heartless.
They don't
so
realize
heartless.
how close they came to sealing his fate
Yeah.
and death. And then, so he gets to the bridge and he jumps 270 feet to the water, 70 feet below the surface. But he said and I'm not going to tell you everything because I don't want to spoil it all. But he said as soon as he jumped, he regretted it instantly. And he said, God, what have I done? Please save me. Well, obviously he lived or he would not have appeared on my show.
Right. Yeah.
But now he is a huge, there is the Kevin Hines story. It's the Kevin Hines Foundation. But like on Instagram, he's on there as Kevin Hines Story. If you Google Kevin Hines Story, he'll pop up.
Okay.
But then there's the Kevin Hines Foundation.
Right.
And his foundation is huge advocates for suicide prevention and mental health awareness. And that was part of a big discussion that me and him had was, the drug rate this year, how the usage of drugs have went just skyrocketed this year.
Right.
The depression rate, the suicide rate.
It is. It's out.
Just
It's
the
through the
numbers
roof.
that we know about already.
Yeah.
That's not to count the numbers that we don't know about yet.
Right. Right.
It's scary. It is so scary to think about what those numbers are going to be come the end of the year. Mm-hmm. And where I was going with this whole thing was, as much as I am a Christian and I believe in the power of prayer, I have seen how the power of prayer works.
Mm-hmm.
Because I asked Kevin, I said, because he said when he jumped, he said, I did what I've known how to do since kindergarten. I prayed.
Yeah.
I said, well, I'm going to ask the question that I know a bunch of people out here have probably said, well, if you believe in prayer, why didn't you just pray your way out of wanting to commit suicide? He said, I'm so glad you asked me that.
Yeah.
And I said, now, mind you, I'm not asking that. I know it will be said by somebody out here.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing for drug addiction. It's the same thing for anything.
Yeah.
Anything that stems from mental illness of any type.
Yeah.
And if you have a drug addiction, there's some type of mental illness going on. What is it from? A trauma in your childhood?
Yeah. I'm a firm believer that
depression is mental illness. Anxiety is mental illness.
Yep.
All of that is mental illness. And if you don't, like you said earlier, if you don't get the help for whatever caused you to turn
trauma,
then you're not going to be able to forgive yourself. You're not going to be able to forgive whoever. Mm-hmm. It all stems back to whatever happened to cause that. And if it caused you to be depressed, if it caused you to have anxiety, then guess what? That's a mental illness.
Yeah.
And you can't just pray your way out of it.
Mm-hmm. You need to talk to people. You need to talk to somebody that can help you.
Exactly.
You have to be so careful of who you talk to about stuff too.
Bingo.
Because you can't just talk to anybody because people can plant even worse seeds than what you're already going through and just cause doubt and discouragement to take root in your heart. And then you're never it's going to be forever till you're brave enough again to face it again.
Absolutely.
And you got to be brave enough to face it. You have to, because if you don't, you're just going to continue to go through all of these cycles. For me,
you'll be in an endless cycle.
Yeah, the depression and the anxiety, and it flares up at times. It's not something that I live with on a constant thing, but when it does flare up, it will last for days and sometimes a week or so on end, and then I'll snap out of it again. And I have more good days than I have bad days, though, so that's good. And it didn't used to be like that. It wasn't always like that.
Victory. That's when you know it's a victory.
Yes.
because I have depression and anxiety as well.
Yeah.
And so I know what that is like, and it can be severe at times.
There'll be nothing wrong, but everything in the world is wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
that's how it feels.
for people that have never experienced it, like you said a while ago, people that have never walked in those shoes,
Right.
you know, don't have any idea.
Mm-mm. No.
They don't have any idea. And it can be debilitating.
It is.
Absolutely debilitating. But when you can get to a point, and what you just did, when you say, I have more good days than bad days.
Yeah.
That's a victory.
It wasn't always like that though. Like,
oh no,
every day of my life was a bad day. It was horrible. But as I dealt, and I'm dealing with the pain, sucked. It sucked. Healing sucks. And while you're doing it, it sucks because it seems like everything is more chaotic while you're healing. Then and your emotions are like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. But once you get through it on the other side, you're like, okay. And you feel lighter in your chest, and your chest isn't so tight. You still kind of got a little bit of anxiety because you got other stuff in there that you need to deal with, but you're actually able to start you feel a little resuscitated, like you're going to be able to start walking through it more. So yeah, I'm huge on healing. Like it's so important. It's so important to deal with the roots.
Absolutely.
And not become bitter, which is something that I'm learning now, is not to be bitter with where I've been, with what has happened. It's hard, and I ain't figured it out yet. I'm trying, and I know that it is something that I am supposed to work on, because everywhere I turn is talking about not being bitter. My pastor, all he wants to preach on is bitterness, it seems like. And then every time I go to read a book, it's talking about not becoming bitter. If I read, just open my phone and start scrolling, something about bitterness comes up, and I'm like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to deal with right now. Obviously, is like dealing with all this bitterness and stuff that I've allowed to take root and getting rid of it. It's hard. It is so hard. But what we don't realize is that it's not hurting the other person. It's hurting us.
No, I absolutely, yeah. And do you think that bitterness comes from not really, truly down deep? I know this is the answer for me. I know it is, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. It's wrong, but I'm being honest. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I only have bitterness toward one person. I only have bitterness toward one person. Well, I got a little bit of bitterness toward like one or two other people, but it's not like debilitating. It's to the point where I can still back out of it and get over it, and I know that I can deal with that easier. But there's a root that is taken root, and it's because I haven't forgiven the person because of everything that's still going on. It's hard. And so that's something that I'm trying to okay, I have to stop letting this destroy me and my attitude and my personality and who I know that I am, because that's what it's doing. It's changing me. And into someone that I don't want to be. I don't want to be mean. I don't want to be miserable. I want to be happy. I just want to smile. I just want to be happy. And the bitterness is not allowing me to do that.
Well, I don't want those people to take up residence in my heart anymore.
Right. Exactly.
You know, I don't. And that's why I'm so glad that you came on here, because I love that you're talking real and open and raw and honest about that. I think this is what I feel like anyway. This is the whole reason for me creating this show was to give a voice to, because your story is important. It needs a voice. And most of all, I want other people out there to know that they're not alone in the way that they feel.
Yeah.
You know, and because I think so much that, I mean, honestly, deep down, I guess I knew I wasn't the only person, but like hearing you say you felt that way too makes me know that I'm not alone. And I know that my bitterness comes from not forgiving yet.
It's about progress, not perfection. You don't have to.
Yeah.
Don't hide where you're at. You don't have to give people all the details, but
Well, it's funny that you said the word hide. It's funny because not haha funny, but it's because as much as people want to hide or try to hide things, we can't hide from God.
Right.
He knows everything and anything anyway.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're not really hiding anything. You're
Right.
just giving off a false persona to people out here. And that doesn't do it doesn't do you any good or me any good or whoever's doing it. It doesn't do yourself any good in the healing process.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna truly, truly heal, you have to be 100% honest with yourself.
You do.
Even
You
if
do.
you're not with anybody else, you have to be 100% honest with yourself.
And being honest with the right people.
Yeah.
Like being honest and transparent with the right people, because
Absolutely.
if perfect Sally's over here and you try to get honest with her, she's going to make you feel worse than when you went to her. You're going to leave feeling more defeated. So using wisdom on, is this somebody that I need to open up to, and examining how they handle themselves? Do they admit when they have problems? Are they acknowledging stuff that's happened to them in the past? Like, if they're not, do not open up to them, and get away from people that think they're perfect. Stay away from those kinds of people, especially if you're walking through healing and stuff like that. Don't do that to yourself. Don't acknowledge anyone or allow anyone to have a seat in your life that makes you feel like you have to be perfect.
Absolutely.
Ever.
That was
I don't have time for that.
Yeah. That was perfectly said. I cannot believe that we're 10 minutes over an hour already.
Are we really?
I cannot believe the time went by that fast. Yeah. So people's attention spans may not be as long as ours are. We could probably keep talking all night long, but I think we made our point to anybody that is watching with us that I wanted to get out there. I thank you so much, Marissa, for coming on and sharing your story, being brave and putting it out there for all of the internet to hear and see. But that's what it takes, is for just one person to step forward and be real and share their story of struggle, and to let someone else know that they're not alone.
Yeah.
That there's other humans out here just like them that have fallen, that have made mistakes.
Yeah.
But you learned from your mistakes. You picked yourself up, you dusted yourself off, and you are rocking it now.
Yeah.
And
failure's not the end.
Exactly.
It's only the end if you let it be.
Right. And the bottom is not the end.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're on the ground, you can't go anywhere but up.
Yep, that's right.
But you just have to open your eyes, reach up, and ask somebody to help you, because you're probably not going to get back up on your own.
Right.
You can get back up on your own, but will you stay there? Unless you get the right kind of help for whatever the situation is, you're not going to stay there unless you get some help. And I'm glad you said that about seeking the right kind of help. And I think like you said, you felt it when that person started pouring the love into you. You felt it. You knew that was the person. Mm-hmm. So I think that is something that, like, my son has said that. My son goes to therapy. He does not care that I broadcast that, I know.
Yeah.
The first therapist that he went with was like, okay, I can talk to her. Yeah. I'm really not getting anything out of it.
Yeah.
So I took him to a different place, and the first therapist he had at this location, well, they just didn't click at all.
Yeah.
It's like, she just didn't understand, she was older. They just didn't click at all. His therapist that he's been with for the last 4 years, they're like best friends.
Yeah. Then that's the way that it should be. Like, it's a connection. Like,
absolutely. And he knew it. They clicked right away.
Yes.
And he knew it. And she has been a godsend to him.
Mhm.
I mean, she has helped him. So he has severe OCD and anxiety.
Yeah.
And she's just been a godsend to him. And so I think that my point is, it when you find the right person.
You do.
When you find that person that can help you heal and reach that trust again. Reach that level of trust with somebody that you feel like you can open up to.
Yeah, exactly. And my mom too, I'm telling you, she has relentlessly poured into me, and she's still there for advice. If I need advice or I need somebody to pray for me, she's there. I mean, and she gives me sound advice. She don't give me what Marissa wants to hear. If Marissa's wrong, she tells Marissa this is wrong. And it's not always fun to hear, but because I trust her.
Yeah.
It might sting, but it doesn't hurt. It does, but it doesn't like make me go, I don't care. I'm going, dang, like that's a me problem. Like, you need to fix you, Marissa. Like, that's you. You need to do something about this, because
right.
She's just it's like she effortlessly I trusted her, but then she fought for my trust too. When I got kicked out of that rehab, she didn't just let me go. Like, she hunted me down, and she was emailing me. She was trying to figure out where I lived. She was writing me letters whenever she figured out where I lived. I mean, she was relentlessly trying to keep that relationship with me. And
that's awesome.
I didn't understand why, but today it shaped she nurtured me like a mom, and I needed that, the nurturing part of it. So
right. Well, and she knew that.
She did.
Yeah. Well, that is awesome that you found that. I'm so glad that you did, because otherwise you might not be sitting here with me right now.
Right. Yeah, it's very true.
So I am so thankful for that. I'm so glad I reached out to you and met you, and lo and behold, we are neighbors. So
ain't that crazy?
I know, that's so crazy. So I am so glad, and thank you for coming on here and sharing. I very, very much appreciate it. And anybody that is watching or will watch the replay later, you heard Marissa say, if you are one that is struggling with any kind of addiction and you don't know where to turn or you don't know where to go, reach out to her. She'll help you. I'm here as well. You're welcome to reach out to me. If I can't help you, I will get you to somebody that can.
And if you're a man, my husband can help you, but you're welcome to reach out to me, and I will point you in that direction. What I meant.
If I can't help you, we'll hook you up.
Yeah, I got you. We'll figure it out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up. I'm a firm believer that men and women can be just friends. But I think in these type situations that a man needs a man and a woman needs a woman.
Yes, 100% agree.
I mean, that
100% agree. This is a touchy situation, and it is something that opposite sex do not need to be helping each other with.
Absolutely. And
now, if it's a husband-wife team or something like that, that's different. But never. Those are boundaries that don't need to be crossed.
Well, I think that's a given in AA and NA.
Absolutely, it is.
Anyway,
it's that they tell you not to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought was kind of like I don't know if it's a written rule or an unwritten rule, but I thought that was like a rule anyway. But it makes perfect sense.
It does.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in, or for those that will watch later. I appreciate it very, very much. We'll be back next Wednesday. I was trying to think, because we're so close to Christmas.
No.
We will be back next Wednesday with another guest. But until then, y'all be safe. Happy shopping if you're out doing that. Not me. Amazon for me.
Yeah. Click, click, click.
Exactly. But Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy New Year, and stay safe.